Hi, this is the Social Jello with Angelo show. My name's Angelo. I'm a social scientist, surfer, martial artist, and a whole lot of other things. Coming to you live from Kasai City, Japan, the Social Jello with Angelo show.
What's up, and welcome to another episode of Social Jello with Angelo podcast. Today we're going to cover the controversial topic of BJJ politics. I'm going to open this up with the idea that I've been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu now for 18 years, and I started back in the early 2000s, and now we're in 2025, and just in that short amount of time, Jiu-Jitsu's changed, and it's not the same Jiu-Jitsu I recognize. And I'm still a brown belt. Why? 18 years of doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I'm still a brown belt. Some will say that I didn't compete. Well, I did compete. I did MMA, and I've also done submission grappling, and I've also done no-gi Jiu-Jitsu. So it's not that I didn't compete. I competed out in Japan mostly. Maybe you can argue that I didn't compete enough. But some people don't compete at all. Now, that was another weird thing. I came in recently, 8 years ago, I restarted doing Jiu-Jitsu formally under a Gracie banner that I'm not going to mention which one. And I saw people getting promoted for no longer. Now they accept hobbyists. When I first came in, they did not. They had hobbyists, but they were kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Sandbagged. They were sandbagged because they were hobbyists. They were sandbagged. They weren't put along the system. They were kind of held back for being hobbyists. And now I come in years later to the place I'm at, and you just come in twice a week. Make sure that bill's paid. And you'll have your blue belt in 1 year. You'll have your purple belt in 4 years. You'll have your brown belt in 6 years. You'll have your black belt in 8 years. As long as you come in twice a week, you don't have to compete. You don't even have to be good. You can get slaughtered. Those 8 years could you be being slaughtered on the mats, and you will walk away, and you'll be coaching by the time you get your blue belt. I'm not going to mention the name of the school I'm talking about, but anybody who knows jiu-jitsu knows exactly who I'm talking about. 1 year in, boom, you have your blue belt and you can start coaching. All you got to pay is $250 for your instructor certificate. You will be IBJJF certified coach, the gold standard of coaching. All it takes is a quick multiple choice test that you take online through the services that they provide. I'm not naming the school. I'll let you guess. And boom, you're certified. So how did we get to this point is my question. To talk about this, I have T. Lee, T. Lee, break down your background in 5 minutes. I'll give you a 5-minute spiel of breaking down your. Yeah, no, that's that. We can do a whole podcast because we talked off camera so much about this. But if you can condense it into 5 minutes of your background in jiu-jitsu, relationship with jiu-jitsu, and historically how it's been for you on your journey with jiu-jitsu.
I'm gonna try and take less time since we took so much off camera, so we can get to the good stuff.
Okay.
So I started jiu-jitsu in the 90s. All right, so I'm technically old school. I started with a guy who fought in the UFC, fought ADCC. So we were his training partners. Fabian Iha is his name. He was Quentin Jackson's coach. Everybody old school know Fabian Iha from the Joe Charles days. Joe Charles hooked him up, who's another legend. But anyway, when we started, it was still like kind of martial arts. Because remember, I started training in the 80s first and jiu-jitsu in the 90s. It was for people who wanted to defend themselves and wanted to fight. You didn't have as many commercial schools. When I started, matter of fact, the World Championship hadn't made it to the States yet. So it was different. So you had to fight. There was no other option. I mean, you're in that gym training, putting holes in walls. The stuff we're doing, I laugh because guys would have ran. And matter of fact, there were guys that didn't come back from some of the training said that was common, right? Nowadays, I always say the guys doing jiu-jitsu are the guys that never would have wrestled, because it's so welcoming and so soft. Anyway, like yourself, it took me a while because back in those days, like I said, I started with Fabian Ia. I ended up getting my blue belt from Silverado Pimenta, who's John Jacques Machado's second black belt. Then he left, took off to Brazil. We ended up with this other guy named Julio. If you know anything about Brazilians, there's a million Julios, right?
Yeah.
There was a rumor, I don't know how true it is, but later on, another Brazilian told me he was one of the guys that put on a black belt on the plane over or whatnot. And, I don't know. Part of me, I like to believe he was, but I remember one time there was a wrestler that came in. That's another thing. I was a wrestler. So prior to starting BJJ, I had 6.5 years of wrestling. All right. This guy came in and the wrestler was just giving him, oh my God, the business. At one point in time, wrestling was a kryptonite for BJJ. I'm gonna be honest. Those that know. Everybody will say this, but it was, okay? And it took him like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, barely to finally do a famous, hey, I got a submission. But the guy was just working him. Then he said, oh, you go with my top student. Let's just say I was a much better wrestler and I just worked. I did not get worked the way this instructor got worked. This guy wrestling was not that good to me. And because I knew wrestling, that's the power of wrestling, which I tell people, there's no such thing as no gi submission wrestling. We need to call it what it is. Danaher said it, but I said it a long time ago. And I'm glad now people you'll listen to are saying it, but that's the facts, okay? Give credit where credit is due. Anyway, like yourself, because I got my blue belt at that time, they didn't have all these schools. I was a blue belt for like 10 years. Fast forward, start training with another guy. I say, okay, because I had divorced myself from BJJ for a while because I was just tired with the politics. That's the name of the show. I don't want to go too deep. Anyway, I went to a guy. I got my brown belt from him. Then I finally made my trip to Brazil, hooked up with my team now, GF team, Master Julio, my brother Wagner, some of the best people in the world. I finally got my black belt, after 17 years of training. So like, 10.
Oh, you beat me.
I probably should have got it 10 years sooner, but whatever. I got a couple other black belts along that journey, you know what I'm saying? But that's kind of why we're talking about this, because there's politics we probably don't agree with. And then there's politics now that I kind of see a different way because age kind of does that to you, like what you were talking about earlier about the guys that don't compete and they're coaching in a year. And I'll just say this because in judo, we kind of need that. We're like, I look at coaching different. All right. First of all, black belt is just varsity, is what I say. Like you were saying off camera, guys in junior high get their judo black belt. Keep this in mind. Your first degree black belt, which is showdown, and BJJ, for some reason, my Brazilian brother can't count. It's not a degree until in most arts, your first degree will be your second degree. Okay. I'm just saying. All right. So when you're trying to go to other people, they don't understand that. Anyway, showdown just means you know the basics, which will be equivalent to varsity. You could say every belt prior to black belt, your JV, whatever, Pop Warner. All right. But showdown just means that. That's why there's 10 degrees. Okay. Or 9, which is really 10. Okay. Anyway, you get the point that I'm saying, right?
Yeah. Jiu-jitsu math ain't easy.
yeah. Yeah. We close our eyes and roll with it, right? Politics. So with that being said, if I'm running a kids program in like a problem neighborhood, a gang infested, drug infested neighborhood, I'm a guy, I just appreciate, love martial arts. I might not be the best, but I see this group of kids and I want to start something to help them. All right. Should I be able to get a coaching certification within a year? I say yes. Why? What's he doing? He's trying to help out this community with something that we all love. There is no harm in that. They're kids, okay? He's not trying to make world champs. He's just trying to keep them off the streets and out of trouble. So this is why I'm giving a reason why I see it a lot differently now, where we need more of those than possible arrogant black belts. Because you got to keep this in mind. Most people at the highest level, they're just that. They're top tier athletes. They're not the best coaches. They're not the best role models per se. We like to put that pressure on them, but you can't make somebody what they're not, right? So do I agree with coaching at lower belts? I do, depending what you're going to do with it. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying go open your own school and get people hurt. But if you're trying to create an after school program to keep these kids off the street and you're just trying to give them something that works, go for it. Because I tell you this, my wrestling coach was a football player. He never wrestled. He learned to wrestle from the Von Hitchcock camps. So he was motivated enough because he saw the greatness in wrestling and he learned to be a coach. And if you look at any high school teacher, if they want to be a coach for a sport, they can do that. They don't have to have a PE degree. They can coach because most of our sports are after school in the States, right? So they can coach, get that extra stipend. They go get whatever coaching certificate. And your history teacher is now your football coach. We all went through it. You know what I'm saying? Your science teacher is your soccer coach because maybe they played in high school and college. So I'm not against these lower ranks. Long as we know, and I do, but people are just foolish. They are what they are. You get what I'm saying? And those are the people, that's what you would call grassroots to help a sport grow. So I'm not against that at all. You know what I'm saying? As long as it's for what it's for. You're doing high school, middle school, elementary, or even a club for kids. It's fine with me on that. I
And
hope
then
I gave my history.
yeah, and then the only reason I bring that up again, I don't have a problem with this, right? I have no problems with this. I'm just coming from a generation where they sandbagged you. They sandbagged me, and then when I went to that place, they sandbagged me just because I did MMA, because I wasn't participating. And it's going to be very confusing because what you call sports jiu-jitsu and what I'm about to call sports jiu-jitsu are two different things. But what I like to coin as sport jiu-jitsu or IBJJF jiu-jitsu. Let's just say that, like where they're competing with the gi, and that is they would reward that, and they would reward coaching at the dojo more than anything you did outside because it wasn't helping them politically, right? So if you wanted to get fast track politically, you play ball with them, you work for them. That's really what it was. My split with them was I wouldn't want to work with them. Like I didn't want to work for them, not even work with them. I was willing to work with them, but they wanted me to work for them, like become an employee. And I'm just no.
Yeah, you got other things going on.
Yeah, and that's the major conflict at the end, and the reason I'm still a brown belt is because they approached me saying I couldn't coach anymore, and I came in saying, hey, I'm already a Kajukenbo instructor and MMA coach. And I broke down the acronym and they just didn't listen. I was like, it's karate, it's jujitsu.
Yeah.
And they looked at it like, oh, you're not doing jujitsu. You're not doing jujitsu. No, we saw the videos you're doing. You're not doing jujitsu. Because most of the videos I was sharing had striking. But as soon as they started finding videos of just grappling, which they did find, and I told them, and they were like, oh, that's a violation of contract. You're not allowed to teach jujitsu. I'm like, in plain Japanese, I'd say plain English, but I'm in Japan. So in plain Japanese, I told you I'm coaching jujitsu, I'm coaching grappling. I'm already coaching this. Like, I'm just here because I need a higher caliber of people to roll with because at that time I was still competing, and I need more rolling partners. And it's funny that the reason I ended up in there was because my student told me I should go there. I had one of my students tell me, he's like, hey man, you get ready for your next fight. They just opened a school about 30 minutes from your place. It's probably a good place. You can find some higher people to roll with. One more day out of the week because I was traveling 2 hours to go train with my team that was 2 hours away on a Sunday because of my work schedule. Like, okay, cool. I can finally, otherwise than that, I'm rolling with my students, which as you know, is not going to be that great. So like, I'm like, all right. So I finally have more people to practice with. That's really why I was there. And I told them that off the bat. And it was all good up until I retired and I started getting up there. And then brown belt started coming around. And over there in that school at brown belt, you can run your own franchise. I'm really kind of screaming who I was almost working for, but either way, and they wanted me to put their logos all over the place. And they not only that, out in Japan, and then I found out this. I think this was the straw that broke the camel's back. I'm not throwing them under the bus, but I found someone who's under the same banner in New York City, and he told me that's not the way we're doing things in America. And I'm like, wait, what? You don't have to. He's like, no, man, I've never paid instructor's certificate to teach here in my life. And then I found out, okay, that's probably your instructor's paying that for you. He's like, and every school's allowed to make, so they're given their rules, and then every school's allowed to dictate how they're going to do their politics from there. And it just so happens that in Japan, they decided, well, I don't know if they decided, it's very Japanese of them to stick.
Well, look, the Japanese, when I went out there, they do things different.
Yeah.
I was with a Brazilian. So you got two cultures. You got a Brazilian culture, you got a Japan culture, right?
Yeah.
And the Japanese, they got their own stuff that's a lot different from how they do it in the States.
Yeah.
I saw that when I went over there, so I really understand what you're talking about.
Yeah. So like,
and until people go, they don't. I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So pretty much the way it works is they have their headquarters in Japan, and they're gonna follow what the Brazilian or the American Brazilian. And I'm still trying to avoid saying names for legalities. Are telling them to do. But what they don't know is that in America, you're flexible. You're allowed to do whatever you want as long as you pay their dues. But they're going by the book, by whatever they tell them. And they decided to create their own headquarters in Japan and then make rules to try to spread the art in Japan by saying that every brown belt must franchise under them legally, put their logos, work by their rules. They will choose your location, and then they will give you loans and help you apply for the loans, and then you pretty much owe them. They own you. And I knew that because I talked to the guy before we started. He'd ask me funny questions like, hey, you just got mats in your gym? I'm like, yeah. So how about the association? Did you talk to the association? I'm like, no. Why the fuck do I have to talk to the association? KSDI doesn't give a fuck what the fuck I do. Like, No. So how much did you pay for the mats? I'm like, I think I paid like about in Japanese yen to USD. I probably paid under like $5,000 for the season. So how much mat space is that? I'm like, it's about what is that? 1 yard, because it's by yards. It's by meters, not feet. So it's like, I don't know, it's about 100, it's about 25 square yards, if I were to say that. No, we're 250, 500 square feet. Let's say that, about that. And he's like, oh man. Like, what do you mean, oh man? And I was a blue belt at the time, and he was a lot more open when we first started to talk about this kind of stuff. As I got older, he stopped talking about this stuff. But he's like, oh, they just charged me like, they made me spend $10,000 on a smaller, because I have to go through this
vendor.
I can't say the name of the school's approved vendor, right? So it was just a giant money making scheme, which brings me to my next first part of our BJJ politics, and talking about our money making schemes. To talk about why I think it's like this, we can't mention any of this without talking about the origins, because your art is always going to be affected by where it started, and specifically, I'm talking about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. So with Carlos Gracie, we go back before Carlos Gracie Sr., all the way back to the first Carlos, the first Carlos Gracie. He worked with circus performers in the catch wrestling community, and he was a fortune teller, right? That's his background. And I think it's Rickson Dresdale. I always forget the guy's name.
Robert Drysdale.
Robert Drysdale goes into a deep dive. If you want to learn more about that, he goes into a deep dive of Carlos Gracie and his history, which I don't have a problem with. That's cool. That's. And I recently came up with a video of how they used the catch wrestling community to kind of manufacture the Gracie name to be what it is. And because of those connections, he met a lot of politicians, because he did fortune telling, which you got to do what you got to do, I guess. Through these connections, he may or may have not actually met Maeda. Why do I say that? He might have briefly met Maeda, but Maeda was also a politician. Carlos Gracie also getting into the politics and politician circle. Now we're talking outside of Brazil, like outside of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu politics, but regular, good old school government politics. And Maeda he was a judo black belt, but like we mentioned earlier in the show, in Japan, they do things differently. And now, but even more so back then, pre-world, World War II era-ish, right? Everyone got a black belt in judo if you went to school. And you didn't really have a choice, because everyone also served in the military. More things you did not have a choice in. And if you're going to serve in the military, then you're going to have a black belt in judo. How high of a caliber that is a completely different story. But you're going to kind of be thrown through. And it's not like in America where they're trying to get Olympic black belts for everything. It's more of a fast track,
like high school wrestling.
It's high school wrestling.
High school sport, yeah.
And back then, it's also a pipeline to get you into the military to serve. That's really what it was. So that's really what it is. Now, I'm not going to go whether Maeda served in the military or not. I don't know, but I do know that's probably how he ended up doing judo. And then he started spreading judo politically. That's why you hear about, he started traveling, and that's how he ended up with the Gracies. So that's how the Gracies ended up getting kind of maybe or maybe not exposed to judo. Whether they actually learned or practiced under him is a totally different story. Which brings me to a point that you talked about, something about 1951, and how this whole pre-World War II, you have a problem with this. Can you break that down? You said you had a problem with
World War II. They always say, oh, pre-World War II judo, right? But World War II, what year? That ended in the 40s, right? Whereas the Kimura versus Gracie fight was in 51. And then there's this guy, Doug Rogers, who went to Japan. Anyway, my point, same thing like Okada. If you look, it's arguably up until about 1964, even 1970, they were still doing what they would call the pre-World War II old style judo. Okay. So when they say pre-World War II, that's setting it back. You're erasing almost 20 to 40 years per se. You know what I'm saying? That's the problem I have. Like it was the judo and jiu-jitsu match, because even like, okay, what you've said on your show, you had one guy on it, he was talking about oh my God, what's the guy? You just had this
Uncle
one
Frank.
old time. Uncle Frank.
Yeah.
He was a Danzanryu guy, right?
Yeah, he's a Danzanryu guy.
Okay. That Danzanryu was still the old. If you look at some of those black and white videos they show with the Danzanryu, then the black and white of the Gracie, very similar.
I'd say almost identical.
Okay, me too. All right.
Yeah.
What made the Gracie style different is that incorporation of Vale Tudo. Okay. That's when you really get testing. I was just explaining this to a friend of mine today. Okay, the Gracie Academy, the original academy was run like a country club because all the political, they had doctors, lawyers, politicians, military generals, upper echelon people. That's who they catered to. Now, their fighters or the competition team, we would say today, they didn't practice with those guys. That was a whole separate thing. Because why? They have always been awesome business people. I give them that respect, okay? And they're very smart and intelligent with that. So just like how Pedro Valente, he's all, deep into the Kool-Aid because he grew up in it. He can't help it, all right? Like Dreiser was just on the Connect Cash show and they're talking about that. He has loyalties. He does. It's all good, you know? Hey, that's dope. You loyal to the lineage you come from. Awesome. But what they are is what they are. They taught private lessons to the rich of Brazil, which is very smart because that's how they survive. Okay. Humans will always do what it takes to survive. They found survival to giving a product to the upper echelon of where they live. Can't blame anybody for that. That's just what humans tend to do, right? But for street cred, you had to say this was kind of legit. So you had your competition team. You had Carlson, who Drysdale talks a lot about, right? Carlson was I don't give a F, let's do this fighter. You know what I'm saying? And that gave notoriety. So you got like two sides of the same coin with that family. You got the people that could walk amongst the upper echelon, put the pinkies up, eat caviar and all that stuff. But then you got the ruffians because let's be honest, I've yet to see a boxer or any fighter that comes from the upper echelon. It's normally people that come from the gutter that become the best fighters because they're hungry, right? That doesn't change nowhere around the world.
And then what I'm going to mention for anybody who's been watching this whole time, and if you check here, that little link that's been kind of floating here are the Drysdale links. So you can click there to learn more about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu history. Look, another thing, while you're talking, I'm just really quick browsing the Wikipedia page. Nothing I've said is hidden. Like everything I just said right here, word for word. I wasn't looking at the Wikipedia page earlier, but I'm looking at it right now. Word for word, it straight out says that Carlos was taught jiu-jitsu and catch wrestling in 1917, either by Mitsuya Maeda, a traveling Japanese judoka, or Maeda's student, Jacinto Ferro. Later, right? And then, oh, by the way, Carlos was taught jiu-jitsu and catch wrestling. Like it straight out says it. Like it's not, and that's on the Wikipedia page. So you have a problem with some of the stuff I just said, just look at the Wikipedia page and it talks about that. It even talks about the traveling circus and it goes into
Well, the Wikipedia skips. So Carlos trained a lot with a guy named Jiro Ormi and Donato Dos Peris, who was a student of Giganto Ferro. Matter of fact, Peris and the Gracies had a school together. Okay.
okay.
That
Okay.
1925, he was a senior instructor. The rumor is he went off one day. They had a spat. It went from, the Donato Peris Academy to the Gracie Academy. I'll leave it at that. Y'all can look at them. Robert Drysdale. He'll tell you the story of that. It's out there, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
But they always had somebody, under them. And Maeda, like they always say, that was a popular name for whatever reason. It could be political. This is new information I'm hearing. All makes sense. But anyway, it was like this: Coke and RC Cola. Who's the popular name? Okay, if you can say, hey, I was VP at Coca-Cola opposed to RC, it might get you further. You get what I mean? So they use that, but training with a lot of people, I mean, they traveled throughout Brazil with a bunch of the guys. And like you said, catch wrestling, which does not get its just due, was the biggest thing. All right. Matter of fact, I just sent this one video was showing because I always tell people this, man. If you look throughout the world, most wrestling styles had like this judo rule set. And this is what I mean. They drew a circle in the dirt or the sand. First person down was the loser. Okay. And it was this video I just sent, I'll send it to you later, but it shows all these different styles from Europe to Africa to Asia. And it's all the same thing. As soon as the one takedown happens, it's over. Just like with in judo, right? So catch wrestling, my point of saying that is wrestling has always been big, right? And catch wrestling traveled with the circus. Now it was genius what Carlos did because he took what he learned about that traveling circus and created into the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, where they started having shows, they started doing challenges the same way these catch wrestlers were, but they did it locally. But if you look at it, it's the same blueprint. So he learned a lot from that. To deny saying that he didn't learn from that, dude, he just rebranded the same thing. Instead of, well, they did travel from town to town for a little bit, doing challenges throughout their country. To finally, they got the big presence when they had these super fights.
And then I should probably correct myself about Maeda real quick, because anyone who's a history buff, and I'm not going to be a history buff. So when I say he was a politician, what I'm saying is he was chosen by the Kodokan to, and this is pre-World War II. Now this is pre-World War II because Maeda died in 1941. So like this is pre-World War II. In the pre-World War II era of Japan, he was chosen by the Kodokan to demonstrate judo to the rest of the world. Why do I say this is political? Because back then, Japan was very secluded in keeping anyone from coming in. They were still very much, for most of its history, keeping foreigners out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what led to that's what led to World War II. That was why they ended up joining Germany, being like, we don't want anyone coming in, because they've always had that attitude. Arguably, maybe even still now. But so like the thing is with that is, so they wanted the rest of the world to know they were strong, and they felt that he was the man to demonstrate that. So he was out there, yes. He's out there doing judo, demonstrating judo. But the underlining pinnings of this was political, to show how strong Japan can be, how a smaller person can beat a larger person. It was kind of stepping out of the jurisdiction of martial arts and going more into the political arena. And that's what I mean by he was a politician, because he was chosen by the Kodokan to represent judo, not in competition, but in demonstrations, right? He was the king of the demo, as I think that's from the Foot's Way, the king of the demo. That's what he was doing. Not that it wasn't effective, not that it wasn't, I'm not saying any of that, but that's what he was actually doing. So he was trying to spread the art, and in an essence, give a message to the rest of the world of how strong Japan was. And that's why I'm going to correct myself and say he wasn't like a politician like voted for, because I don't want to get into it.
He was a representative because he went out with his instructor.
And he was very much
keep
an
in mind, his
ambassador.
instructor was older, so he needed someone younger. Okay,
Yeah,
Maeda was a guy. So
Yep.
imagine this: I'm 57, Maeda's in his 20s. Who could take those falls better? You get what I'm saying? So he went with a senior student, Tomita, who was, I think he was the first black belt. Okay, he went with him to travel the Americas. They sent representatives to all parts of the world, Europe, parts of Asia. You almost look at it like judo was like kind of the first technology they opened up before Sony, where they spread it worldwide. That's what they were doing. And it brought a lot of networking through this. It was a big deal because, like you said, the Japanese were very secretive. They didn't want to expose. With Kano, this is why I always say, look, man, it's judo we learned. And judo is the grandfather of all the modern martial arts we train in, because they created the gi that every style uses, and they created the belt system. Okay. And he brought a lot of the karate guys on, because you got to keep in mind why he named it judo. Well, when you said jujitsu, they had thousands of these different ryus that couldn't get along. And he said, look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to give it a new name, and we all going to do this. You agree? Those that agreed, they grew, because why? He brought structure and organization. You're an educator. You totally understand how methodology. He saw that, look, it's not that you can't do your own thing, but we got to structure it. It's the difference between a tribe and a nation. Okay. Multiple tribes form together to create a nation. The ones that want to stay tribes, they're not as powerful. This is just how it works. He brought that structure, and he decided, hey, to share it, right? And then you look at judo now, man. Hey, the dopest thing is I can go to any country where I'm training judo, and we speak that common Japanese language. All right. Every technique has a Japanese name. I can't speak Russian, but we on the judo mat, they say Osotogari, I know what they're talking about. Tachiwaza, I know what's up. Newaza, I know what's up. Tachiwaza means standing techniques. Newaza means ground, aka what y'all call BJJ. But we know these things because why? That one guy structured the whole thing. And that's why it's important, because if it wasn't for Kano, none of us would be doing any type of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Okay? It is so heavily influenced. And I mean, think about it. Why was the Kimura fight significant? Why was the fight with the Ono brothers? The Gracies would challenge these Japanese guys who did judo. Why? If I beat a Japanese in his own game, I obviously look like I know what I'm doing. It makes sense from a marketing perspective.
And then arguably, was it really their own game? But we're gonna step away from the history for a second.
Well, that's politics. No, we can answer that really quick, because and that's exactly. I always say they pestered them to their rule set.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, but going back to what we
Which
said
is
off camera
political,
about
yeah.
don't fight their fight. We were saying that off camera, and they were
Yep,
smart
yep.
on making them fight their
Fight
fight,
their
not
fight,
fighting
yeah.
their fight, but making their fight their fight.
That's it.
So fast forward, and
Yeah.
we needed a little history here, and I like history, even though I kind of suck at talking about it. I like to lay out the foundation of history to kind of get you understand what's happening now in jiu-jitsu. Because now what's happening in jiu-jitsu, and you can see another link here, is jiu-jitsu, the new taekwondo. That one really blew up. Where I talk about how the commercialization of jiu-jitsu has made it now in America that everybody's mom, dad, grandma, grandchild, everyone's doing jiu-jitsu now. And when they hear people, they're doing it now, to now standards, to now what jiu-jitsu is now, but jiu-jitsu itself has had several transformations, which we talked about just now, just between my story, your story. I think we just covered and then the history behind that. We just covered almost 100 years of Brazilian jiu-jitsu history in 30 minutes. What's happening now, though, is some people progress really fast, and some people don't get to progress at all, and it seems almost arbitrary and very subjective as to what that looks like. And I see these arguments online all the time. Like if someone goes up there and it's like, hey, I just did this technique, and then someone will be like, oh, that's because that was a white belt, and no, but I'm a brown belt or I'm a black belt. You don't look like a black belt to me. But everyone just starts attacking on the credibility of the person online and whether or not they should or should not have a black belt, which I personally, and we've talked about this off camera, it's not that I've given up on the idea. I'm under someone else now, and they're easy to work with because they minimize the fees. I think I have another video I made about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu politics and the fees and how expensive it is to run a Jiu-Jitsu program. So not that I'm, what's the word I'm looking for? Unappreciative of the people that I'm under now that allow me to have the freedom to do what I do. But it's still very different from Kajukenbo. And that's why this podcast, I think one of the suggestion titles was Kajukenbo Black Belt's Perspective on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And the reason I say that is because coming from a Kajukenbo background, I got my black belt. It took me longer than most. It took me 8 years. Or some people more. Maybe that's already a controversial statement. Some people say they took longer to get their black belts. Right now, a lot of people can get their black belts within 5 years in Kajukenbo. In my instructor's programs, a really dedicated student, and I was really dedicated. I just never showed up for tests because I didn't care about the belts. So it took me 8 years. Why am I saying all this? Because once I got my black belt, my instructor, and maybe that's just my instructor, I'd ask him like, hey, today I was traveling one time and I came to visit him out in the States. I'm like, hey man, I didn't bring my gi. He's like, you're a black belt, man. You can fucking train your underwear. I don't give a shit. Like, you do whatever you want. You get your black belt now. I don't care. And that's kind of like how he saw things, was once you get your black belt, you're free. You follow all the rules. When you do not have that black belt, you must follow all rules. Stuff like you have students only wear red shirts, no black shirts, tuck in your shirt, like all these like really strict rules. You follow all these rules. But once you get your black belt, you know the rules. You're kind of free to bend the rules now within limits, but you're pretty free. You also don't have any money stuff. Like that's with my instructor. And I don't know, maybe some people do, some people don't. So I kind of came in with this real hippity dippity liberal thing going on where I didn't have to pay anybody, anything to run my program. I didn't think that was a controversial thing until I started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And it just seems like there's like this money-making pyramid scheme where like you pay this guy and that guy pays that guy and this guy pays that guy. And there's like everyone's like exchanging hands as far as like association fees and all kind of stuff, which was new to me. I don't know. What do you know about this?
Well, I'm pretty sure. I don't know. Since are you running a Kajukenbo school? Because from some of the history things, they had the same thing. It seems to me like a lot of the Kempo that was in Ed Parker that ended up here in California, they were Kajukenbo. But when they came from Hawaii, they couldn't use that name because they wasn't paying. So you got a lot of different Kempos, Hawaiian Kempo, Saki Kempo. So you were blessed not to experience that. But what I'll say is this. Let's say some people do have that mindset. Like it just depends who's running what school, what organization. Because that's the part I want to kind of segue to. You have all these different associations. So some people they're not under association. So their black belt is a. Let's just say your black belt. I mean, your instructor got his black belt from Hickson, so he doesn't care. All right. Now, when Hickson created his federation, then you got to join that. But let's say it was one of the Machado brothers. It was Roger. He's like, I'm not doing none of this association. So then what happens, even though this guy's a 7th degree black belt, only his people who want to compete, then they have to get under association. But because he's not under this association, they might have your situation where, hey, you're a black belt, man. Do what you want. You know what I'm saying? So things fracture along the way because there's not uh how do I say this? There's not a true recognized governing body since jujitsu is not it's a for-profit. It's not under a non-profit. You get what I'm saying? It's not an Olympic sport, so they don't have to answer to an Olympic committee. So there's a lot of freedom, right? So as it's grown, it's become even more chaotic in a sense. Kind of every art does this. Karate's like this. You got some karate styles that refuse to be JKA. Even in judo, we had this problem. You got some people who refuse to do anything IJF. Okay, it's part of the growth, is what I've come to learn. Okay, is it good? Is it bad? I mean, there should be some structure for safety reasons and stuff like that. I agree to that. But then I think, you should have some freedoms. You know what I'm saying? Because if you don't care, like let's say I don't care, I got a showdown, I don't care to ever be a 9th degree. So I don't want to pay these association fees. Well, that's your thing. You want to do it. Now, long as you're not teaching the kids and you're not verified and stuff like that, maybe not a big problem. But I think that's kind of how we got to where we are because, you know, look at how many denominations of Christian churches there are.
Yeah.
It just
And
breaks away. It's the same thing, just with jujitsu.
so then, and let's break this down because we were talking about politics. Here we go.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm verifying all this with online sources. So that way, I'm not talking off the top of my head. So the IBJJF, to be considered a black belt or to be recognized by IBJJF, I'm just going to use IBJJF as an example because most of the people arguing online come from IBJJF. I'm not going to include other organizations, including the one you are in and others like ADCC and all that
I'm with
stuff.
IBJJF too, but
Okay,
yeah.
cool. So all right, so you know. So
Yeah.
the background going on for those of you students who are doing your thing, you don't know what's happening on the top. So to compete or be recognized under IBJJF, including black, you have to maintain an active membership. Initially, to be as a black belt, you have your formal black belt certificate degree certification, which you initially pay $400 for to IBJJF. And then annually, you pay $150 USD to compete under IBJJF at IBJJF tournaments. Whether you are actually paying this or someone else is paying this for you, that's where things students don't know. Like I told this to a student who asked me about this a long time ago, and I said, "There's a lot of stuff that I do that I shelter you from." I learned that from the guy in New York. I figured if I'm going to keep doing this, because at one point I was like, "Why the fuck do I have to do any of this? Seriously, I don't want to." Like, I just run a small school in the middle of the countryside of Japan. I'm not trying to create world champions. If someone comes in saying they want to be a UFC champion, even though I have pictures of UFC champions and UFC coaches that I've worked with throughout the years, my goal isn't to be a UFC coach. If they say that, I go, okay, man, I can give you the basics. And then I have a buddy out in who's 45 minutes from me who can help you compete in Japan. People don't know these organizations in America, but there's an organization called War Dog, an organization called Gladiator, and these two organizations are working with the One Championship, and also they work with the Japanese MMA Federation. Why am I saying all this stuff? Because those fights will get registered, and they are registered to the international MMA federations, so that when you fight, they'll end up on ShareDog, because ShareDog doesn't let you just put up your record for anyone. You have to be registered for them. These are things I didn't even know. I ended up fighting one fight last minute, injured, and I lost. And I've had fights before that, but because they weren't registered, none of them were registered except for that one fight that I lost. So if you look at my record, I have one loss in MMA on ShareDog. I didn't even know this. And I was like, fuck, the one loss. Why? But either way, what it comes down to is this is what's happening in the background. So for IBJJF, so I didn't know, but someone was paying someone for that to happen, right? And I think that happens a lot with IBJJF and people who practice jiu-jitsu. Like I said earlier, it's become the new taekwondo. You're a student, you're training at wherever you go. You're paying monthly fees, whatever that is, whether it's $100 or $200, whatever it is. That money you pay, part of that gives you a buffer and your instructor a buffer to pay for those fees for you and not have to say anything, right? But if you're like me, who's kind of running everything, you're looking at all this as a headache. Really, an extra bill. Because when my students ask me to compete, I mean, I tell them, like, I'm not registered with IBJJF. I'm not, because they can compete in JBJJF, the Japanese Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Federation. That doesn't require an annual fee. They just charge you a little more if you do a drop-in. So, like, if you're registered with them, they give you a discount to compete at their tournament. If you're not registered with them, you pay a little more. You pay like $30 more. At the end, like, you'd pay like $40 to compete in one category, but if you don't pay their annual fee, you pay $60, right? So it's like twice the amount or whatever. It's like 50. It's like $10-$20 more, but it's not for someone who's not an active, who's a hobbyist. To me, I say it's a waste of money to pay the annual fee unless you're really gonna jump in there and just start going at it. I don't see why you would do that. So the question, I guess, in the middle of all that is, at the end of the day, is it harmful or is it hurtful? Like, you got all those fees, they charge these fees. There's a reason they exist. It's very expensive. Is that considered gatekeeping, or is that just the cost of business? I guess that's my question.
I say today it's the cost of business, because they're not the only one now. At one point, and you can give credit to the IBJ, they're the ones that kind of started. You can have these huge tournaments, right? Now, like here in America, you got the AJF, you got the Abu Dhabi Pro, you got Naga, you got all these other organizations do very good tournaments. You got the NABJJF. So that's their way if you want the prestige, because that's the thing people are paying for. IBJF has this prestige to a lot of people. And here's the funny thing to me, it might change, because all the people where that prestige come from are the guys of our day who started bringing jiu-jitsu to America. But what's happening is some people new don't even know who Hickson is. They don't even know who Hoist is, okay? Because you got to understand, 1993 is over 30 years ago, okay? So some of these new guys who were the heroes, they're kind of fading away. It's like in judo here in America, Hayward Nishioka, big time famous guy. But some of the Olympians that die and stuff, the new kids don't know who these guys are. And I always warn people.
I'll say not just kids, because there was a guy I met that was a brown belt, and he ended up joining Gracie Baja in Japan and became an instructor in the Gracie Baja in Japan, because he said, I wanted to join the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. I wanted to do Gracie Jiu-Jitsu because of what I saw the Gracies do out here in Japan. And I was like, later, I'm like, wait. If that's what you really wanted to do, then you joined the wrong place, because that's not Hickson Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. That's Gracie Baja. That's Carlos Gracie Jr. That's a totally different Jiu-Jitsu. And I never told him that, but he didn't know that. And I was like, that's not really my place. If you want to,
it's funny you say that, because
if you want to enjoy that, let's enjoy that. Enjoy yourself.
I brought that to the attention today of one of my students I was talking with, like Gracie Baja. That's the biggest Gracie brand. But a lot of people say, oh, I trained at the Gracies, and they're meaning Gracie Baja, not knowing, like, there's not many Gracies that actually teach Gracie Baja. It's all students that kind of fall under Carlos Gracie Jr. for the most part. You get what I'm saying? But it's the biggest Gracie brand that there is, where it's literally worldwide.
Yeah.
but they don't know that. It's like what you're saying. They think, oh, they just attach it because that brand name, Gracie, whether it's Gracie University, Hickson Gracie, uh, Carlin Gracie, Carlos Gracie, Carlson Gracie. They just attach the Gracie part. They don't know.
Yeah, they see it all as Gracie as they come
Hmm.
in, and then by the time they figure out what's going on, like they've already started drinking the Kool-Aid. So at that point, they're not really going to question it.
That's
And
great business, man. Great
yeah,
business model.
and yeah, and if things are working good, then they're working good. I think that's what, if you've put up with this conversation for the last hour, I think that's what you can walk away with. For me personally, I've decided that even though 18 years and I'm still a brown belt, there's not going to be a change. Like I used to think, because I was coming from the way my instructor did things, like, okay, I'm rushing for this black belt because it'll save me money. That's all I was thinking. I get the black belt, finally. I don't have to pay all these fees. My students can just train. I'll finally get the respect that I deserve. I'll stop having these motherfuckers come in here and challenge me, because I have that now, still to this day. Fucking some guy showed up a month ago, national champ, outweighed me by 10 kilograms. We're the same age, he's 43. And he's like, first week he was there, he was very respectful. By the second week, he started getting kind of wanky. And we stalemated for 3 weeks straight. He'd come and roll me. We were just at a stalemate. I'd get stuck in his guard. I start passing his guard. At best, I could pass his guard, but I couldn't tap him. He kept getting me in lasso guard, and we spent hours. I spent hours in fucking lasso guard, just trying to get out of lasso guard and passing his guard, and I couldn't tap him. So I got fed up with this after 3 weeks straight, because I'm like, you know what? I'm not learning anything. All I'm learning how to do is pass his goddamn lasso guard. So let me just see what happens. What's he trying to set up? He's trying to set up something. Let's just see what fucking he does. And he set me up into an armbar. I'm like, all right, cool. And I tapped. Like, all right, you got your armbar. Let's play. Let's play jiu-jitsu. Let's do something else. Back to lasso guard. Motherfuckers. So I got fed up with this and caught him in a heel hook. He lost his shit. Started yelling at me. Wouldn't tap to the heel hook. So I switched to a toe hold. Wouldn't tap to the toe hold. I'm like, dude, I'm going to snap this guy's leg. Over what? Over what was my question. And then he started doing what terrifies me. He started rolling while I had him. And I'm like, oh, fuck that. I let go. And then he got up and he yelled at me in front of my students. And because it was after class during our free map period, he yelled at me, all my students, and then he's like, what the hell was that? That wasn't jiu-jitsu. And I'm like, what? He's like, that wasn't jiu-jitsu. Toe holds are illegal in IBJJF and no jiu-jitsu. I'm like, well, we never talked about, first of all, we never talked about what rule set we were rolling under when we started rolling. Earlier, you caught me in a heel hook. Earlier, right before I caught him in that toe hold, he caught me in a heel hook and I tapped. So I figured, okay, heel hooks are on the table. He said, yeah, heel hooks are okay, but toe holds are not. I'm like, all right. All right. Look, how's this? It seems like, he's like, I've had knee injuries. I'm like, I've had knee injuries. So if you don't want to use leg locks, we can throw out leg locks and we'll just stick to no leg lock jiu-jitsu rule set to avoid injuries. But we need to communicate. And ever since then, like, he's like, oh, you teach MMA, you don't teach jiu-jitsu. I realized at that point, because before that, I didn't have a certificate on the wall. I'd kept my certificates in a drawer. And I thought having the certificate on the wall would avoid that right there. That situation right there. Someone accusing me of not being a real quote unquote jiu-jitsu coach. And I realized, oh, this problem is just going to be like, no matter what. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what rank I have. That could have been a black belt. That could have been the 3rd degree, because by the way, in Japan, you can't run your own academy on your own without having to pay association fees till your 3rd degree black belt. I don't know how it is in America, but that's how it is in Japan. And I realized, okay, this will be something that I'm just going to live with. Like, no matter. So what's the rush? Who cares? Who cares if I'm a brown belt? Who cares if I'm a black belt? To some degree, who cares if I'm a 3rd degree black? You know how old I am going to be by the time I get a 3rd degree? If I keep this up, like By the time I get my third degree, I joke around. I'll be so old I won't be able to roll anymore. Like, yay! I finally can affordably teach jujitsu, and I can't even barely do jujitsu anymore. Hopefully, I'll have someone under me, and I shelter my students. So, if anything, if you've put up with this conversation long enough, my advice to you is to shelter your students. Don't, because it's gonna kill jujitsu. It's gonna kill their ambition. If they hire all this BS, if you put all this BS on them, it's gonna make them not want to do jujitsu, which is sad because jujitsu is actually really fun to do. It's a great art. I love it, but it's gonna take away some of that love because you're kind of putting a price tag on it. And the smart people have done that. So if you're a coach and you're coaching, my advice to you is shelter them from it. That's what I did. I decided to say, instead of adding the annual fee to their monthly fee, instead of telling them, hey, do you want to be in the jiu-jitsu program? And that's going to be blah, 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 blah more. This certificate, I just don't talk about that. And I just charge monthly dues that cover all that shit. And I just, here you go. And I don't even talk about it. So,
well, a lot of guys here now are not pushing competition like they once did, just because there is so much competition amongst schools, meaning there's choices. They don't want to lose them to injuries and competition. So if they want to compete, then they'll figure a way for them to join up whatever association, federation, so they can do that. And I mean, the big one is IBJJF. So they find a workaround. But nowadays, and I get it, because you got a school on every corner. That's why the whole self-defense thing is getting big again, because it's like, man, I'd rather just do this. Those meatheads you just talked about in that story, they don't want those guys, because we're all getting older now. You know what I'm saying? We're all hit on that third quarter of life, if not fourth quarter. So it's like, I ain't got time for that. I just want to teach. Younger me would have been like, bring it on. Them days is gone, right? I just want to spread the art, improve myself, yada, yada. So a lot of guys, they don't even push the competition. And so they save those fees and they say, hey, they'll do like you do, introduce them to a friend at another school or get a friend to sign off so that they compete in it. Because to run the business, like what you just said, you don't want to lose your students,
yeah.
to injury. Because once they're injured, hey, you just lost the customer.
Yep.
That's just what it is.
Yep.
And so that is big here now. Like, we can talk, every one of these keyboard warriors, they talking like they're just a big, they don't compete at all, most of those guys.
Yeah, that's what I think as well. They act like they'll talk about, they like to drop names like John Danaher and his top student, I already forgot his name. The king of
Gordon Ryan.
Yeah,
those guys are just watching YouTube all day. They're not even on the mat. I promise you. They're not. These guys are talking, oh, well, what about so-and-so? It's like, Transformers versus He-Man or something like that. Just out the damn water. All right? Oh, well, Optimus Prime, and somebody's like, well, no, He-Man, and, his sword, or if I'm lying on the Sword of Omens, he's going to slice through that metal, whatever. Cybertron has no choice. Look, you can't get into it with these guys, man. I know some of you young kids like, what is he talking about? Angelo gets that, right? It's these crazy rabbit holes, man. Yeah, remember, you would have those conversations, except for it'd be me and you sitting down, not online, and it might end up to a pushing and shoving match, beat each other up, then we sipping Kool-Aid later.
Oh man, no, that one. And
ice teas on.
I used to get into fights over whether or not pro wrestling was real, or
oh yeah,
or my friends, pro wrestling is real. Well, Hulk Hogan fucking sucks. Ultimate Warrior's the best. yeah.
Macho Man's Liz will kick Hulk Hogan's ass. He's nothing.
So yeah. All right. Well, so either way, if anything, I hope that you guys, after watching this conversation, can get an idea of what's happening online and what's happening brick and mortar, what's happening behind the scenes. A little quick sneak peek behind the scenes. If you're just a student, don't let any of this discourage you. If you're just a student, you didn't have to deal with half the shit I just mentioned. Go give your instructor a huge hug and say thank you, because they're sheltering you from all this, and you are training at a great place where they care about you. And that's, I think, at the end of the day, that's really what you want to do. Whether or not you're in the big money jiu-jitsu or in the lower fields of jiu-jitsu like me, you care about your students, and you just want them to be able to defend themselves and enjoy a beautiful art with hopefully not breaking the bank. Keely, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to come out as usual and talk about BJJ politics. And for the rest of you, I want to thank you for checking out Social Jello with Angelo podcast. One of these about martial arts once a week. And catch y'all next time.
This has been a Social Jello production. If you're interested in being on the show, feel free to reach out. Just email me at socialjello@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow me on social media, Instagram, Social Jello, Facebook, Social Jello with Angelo, or follow me on my personal page under Angelo Ferrer. LinkedIn, search Angelo Ferrer. YouTube, if you're listening to this on a podcast platform, make sure to check out my YouTube channel, Social Jello with Angelo YouTube channel. And wherever you're listening, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other platform, make sure to follow and subscribe and leave a review. Thanks again for tuning in. See you next time.